Hi, it's me, Jazzy. I'm back with another tech-related video, and today I'm taking a look at a digital multimeter. And it's no ordinary digital multimeter either. This is new from Zoyi. They've just sent me over this digital multimeter with an insulation tester. So big thanks to Zoyi for sending this over for me to take a look at. Now this is the ZT-1000R and it's capable of testing insulation resistance up to 1000 volts, and it will do DAR and PI tests as well. If you're familiar with insulation testing, it's interesting to note that this particular meter will do DAR tests at 15 seconds and 1 minute rather than the traditional 30 seconds and 1 minute. So is that going to be an advantage? Well, we're going to find out. I've got some tests lined up to test all of the multimeter functions and the insulation resistance function of this meter as well. So let's get this meter straight over on the bench and take a closer look. So the Zoyi ZT-1000R. So it's a digital insulation tester. This is a 2-in-1 multimeter and insulation tester with 5 voltage settings. So it's got a Megohm function. So I'm looking forward to this one. So let's dive in, see what we got. A nice little pouch, as you always get from Zoyi. User manual, okay, and battery charger, USB battery charger. Yes indeed, we need that because this meter is lithium battery powered, but you take the batteries out to charge them rather than put a USB-C socket on the meter, which is probably a very good idea seeing as this deals with up to 1000 volts. Here we go. Straight away you can see this looks quite a bit different to most of the Zoyi meters we've looked at before. So what have we got? We've got some, these are your high voltage max 1000 volts cat 3 insulated for safety. We've got a thermistor because this does temperature, this does loads of things, and we've got some multimeter probes. Okay, standard Zoyi ones, which are always quite nice actually. They feel very nice, quite like these probes that you get with the Zoyi meters. And these are again cat 3 1000 volts. So let's have the meter itself. It feels robust, it feels chunky. They reckon this bumper gives it good drop protection. Not something I'll be testing today. It does have a stand, which is not bad. It's got an LED work light on the top. It does also have a backlight for the display. Right, let's get that peel off. Nice. Let's have a look at the display. Ooh, okay. Pretty big display. 4.5 digit display with a backlight. I'm guessing if I hold this down. Yes, okay. It's hard to see. I've got my filming lights on. Let's turn my filming lights. Oh yeah, okay. Hang on. Let's turn the other one off. To plunge the studio into darkness. Oh yeah, now we can see the backlight. That's actually alright if you're working in a fairly dim environment. Pretty good. Okay, back to full lighting. There we go. So you can see you've got your Megohm functions here. You've got your insulation tests here, look, and you've got ranges from 50 volts. You've got 50, 100, 250, 500, up to 1000 volts. This does AC and DC voltage up to 1000 volts and all the usual suspects: resistance, capacitance, diode mode, continuity, frequency and temperature. And the temperature range on this goes from -20 degrees C to 1000 degrees C, so it's a pretty good range. Right, the battery charger is of course sealed for freshness. USB A to C cables supplied, very nice, and the meter runs on 3 removable 3.7 volt 14500 lithium batteries. Nice addition that they've given you the charger with it as well. These are sprung. You could use this for charging other batteries. Yeah, you can lie on 10440, 14500, 650, 14650, 16340, 16650, up to 18650. So if you've got some 18650s kicking around, which I usually do, I don't have one on my bench at the moment, normally do, This is actually a handy inclusion. I like that. Bonus points for that. But the star of the show has got to be the Megohm meter function on this. When you go into the insulation mode here, with this you can do insulation resistance testing up to 20 gig ohms. And this will give your DAR, dielectric absorption ratio, and your polarization index, PI. We'll take a look at those in a moment. It looks like you can get the batteries out without having to remove the rubber bumper, and there's a place for your probes, and there's a place to hang it up as well. So we've got our DC volts there. So we've got AC volts. This is a true RMS, this meter. Press select to get to frequency. On this one you've got resistance. Press the selector, it takes you into capacitance, that takes you back. So you've got two functions on each, so it's nice, actually nice and easy. I like the layout of this straight away. So you can see you've got diode mode, press select, goes into continuity mode. So it's nice that there's only two functions on each one. And this is your temperature, and it displays centigrade and Fahrenheit at the same time. Nice touch. You've also got your hold function there as well, standard multimeter hold function. And you've got your rel function there. We've got some more functions to do with the insulation tester, which we'll look at in a moment. So the sockets for the insulation testing are on this side. So they've got it completely separated from your normal test sockets, because you do not want to be getting those mixed up. Let's hook it up to our PDV S2 Mini precision voltage reference. Now let's see what it can do. Let's put it on the stand. The stand is not bad. I'd like to, it's quite a robust meter, so I think I'd like to see a little more girth on the stand, possibly. Just so it feels in line with the robustness of the meter. Although I will say it does stand firm. It's not going, you know, wobble test. It's pretty good. Now, before we start, do I need to rel out these cables? Alright, cables are not going to make a lot of difference in this case. No. Not too worried about that then. These are actually alright test leads. Okay, so at 1 volt, the ZT-1000R is giving me 0.9997. Not bad at all. Alright, 2 volts. See what the linearity is like as we up the voltage. We got 1.9995. This is a 4.5 digit display, this one. 3 volts DC. Bang on. 4 volts. I'm liking this meter. 5.0. Yeah. Oh, okay. It's pretty quick as well, which I like. And this is on auto range. Nice. 8. It's pretty darn spot on, isn't it? I like the little bar graph thing going on there as well. That's quite cool. I always like visualizations of stuff. 10 volts, we're getting 10.002. Okay, so we're good on DC volts. How about millivolts then? Let's start with 100 millivolts. Yeah, straight away. Yeah, straight in, bang on, look at that, 100 millivolts. Although it stayed in volts range, it's not changed range. Let's drop the voltage down to 10 millivolts. Yes, no problem. Okay. 1 millivolt. Yes. Okay. 0.1 millivolt. Yeah, spot on, 0.1 millivolt. Fantastic. Well, I'd say that's pretty good. Right, so we're set up for AC volts here. Now, because this power supply is not very accurate, I've hooked up my daily driver multimeter, which is a Unity UT70D. This is about the best I've had up until now, although I'm very much liking this Zoyi ZT-1000R. So, will this be my new daily driver? Possibly. Let's try with AC volts. We saw it was pretty good with DC volts. This one is wandering about a little bit. It does do that. But this is not a scientific test, so I'm not going to bother to rel out the cables on this or anything. What I'm interested in is how quickly this one works and whether it changes ranges nicely. So as I up the voltage, we got 5. I mean, it's comparable between the two meters. This one I've always trusted up until now. So the fact that the Zoyi is giving me a similar reading, I'm happy with that. Up the voltage again. We got 7. This was actually quicker, I think, there. I think this is actually getting there a bit faster, this Zoyi. Yeah. Yeah, this keeps up with me changing voltage really quickly. Successful tests at AC volts. I'm really liking this so far. Alright, let's give it a try at continuity then. So let me put the probes in that come with it. Alright, so let's go to continuity, which is there. Alright, continuity beep testing. Oh, hello. Oh, that's pretty darn good. Alright, it's nice and loud. You've got an LED indication. Okay, if you hold it on, you've got continuous beep. Yeah, alright. Continuity beep test, pretty good. I've got a diode test on here. Do I have a diode handy? Alright, we've got our forward voltage there. This is just a random old diode. Okay, it'll test a diode, but again, that's probably not the thing that you're going to be using this for the most. Let's take a look at resistance. Bringing in the resistance box. With all the multimeters I test, I try and keep the tests fairly consistent across the board. Got anything to rel out? No, really. Alright. Okay, one of them. Bang on. 10 ohms. 100 ohms. Not bad. It's fairly quick. It's fairly quick. Alright, let's go for 1K. Yep, there you go. It's pretty quick. Now, in terms of capacitance, I've got this Muirhead decade box here. Now, recently I had the Zoyi DQ02 LCR meter here on test, and what I will say is it picked up, we've got this residual of this decade box. It has a residual of 160 picofarads, and the LCR meter actually did pick up that 160 picofarads. Capacitance mode. Do you know what? It's doing it. Look at that. 160 picofarads is the residual of this box. That's not bad. That's not bad at all. Let's go for 1 nanofarad. So 1 nanofarad plus the 160 picofarads. Bang on. 10 nanofarads and 100 nanofarads. Nice. Okay, and then it's going to change range, and there's our 1 microfarad. So we've got 1.043044 microfarads. All right. So this will go down into picofarads with no problem at all. But my favorite is the 10,000 microfarad test. I have had meters fail at this 10,000 microfarad test, but I don't think this is going to be one of them. Now it's going to take a while to charge up this baby. We got 9 point... Still going, she's still going. Let's give her a bit of time. Alright, so we're hitting 9.52. Yeah, near enough 9.5 millifarads. That's not bad at all. Okay, so temperature wise, I've got a probe hooked up to this hold peak, which I know is normally pretty good on temperature. It's giving me a temperature of 25.4. So halfway in between 25 and 26, pretty much. Now, we haven't got the decimal place on the Zoyi, but it's giving me 26. All right, so it's ballpark with the temperature then, 25.5, which I kind of trust this reading. This meter is usually pretty good on temperature, to 26. So your ballpark with the temperature. It's probably not a function that you're going to use that often, but if you do need to use it to measure temperature, it's pretty good. Okay, so frequency, let's go for 1 kilohertz on 999.7, 10 kilohertz. Yep. Okay, so pretty good on frequency. It's probably not a function that you're going to use a lot on this particular meter. One of the main reasons you're going to have this meter is for the insulation testing. So we're going to try this in a minute. Now, I've done more than a bit of pat testing in my time, so testing insulation is something that I've done on appliances. Now, I will say I am definitely, by a long shot, no electrician, but however, I have been trained in pat tests for a long time, and this is my old pat testing gear. So when I think of insulation tests, I think of insulation tests in terms of pat testing. Now, this is what I generally use. This is my old pat testing gear. Now, it's getting on a bit like me, but it still works like me. Now, this is what I generally would use for testing small appliances, office stuff, and disco equipment, amplifiers, that sort of stuff. Done a lot of pat testing on those over the years. And I've got my earth clip here that goes onto it, and that's generally the bulky thing I would use to test the insulation on an appliance of some sort. So it's got me thinking, can we use this to test the insulation of an appliance? Of course we can. I haven't really got the setup here for testing things like consumer units and DIN rails, that sort of stuff, but we have appliances and cables we can test, so let's have a go. So where this would come in really handy is testing the insulation in fixed wiring installations. So to make sure the insulation hasn't failed on any of your cables, there's no breaks in your cables and stuff. But we can also use it to test extension leads, appliances, and even a transformer. Hey, I've got one right here. Right, so I've got my probes here, and I've got my insulation testing clips I can use. What I will say about the Zoyi products, they always give you everything you need to do the work. It's like with the LCR meter, it came with all the bits and bobs. Now for the insulation test, you want to be using these ports here. Now it's really nice that they've kept them separate. This is important because you're going to be putting some pretty high voltage through these. You don't want to be getting these mixed up with these. That would be bad. I'm going to be wanting to take these guards off here to get these in. Nice. Let's make sure I've got that in there properly. Fantastico. Right. So this will do insulation resistance testing up to 20 gig ohms. So you can measure two different parameters with this meter. You've got your DAR, which is your dielectric absorption ratio, and your PI, which is your polarization index. So the main difference between the two parameters is the DAR compares the insulation resistance values at 15 seconds and at 1 minute to assess the insulation quality. It takes two different readings. You might notice with some insulation meters like Fluke or Mega, they do this reading at 30 seconds and 1 minute, but with the Zoyi it does the reading at 15 seconds and 1 minute. Now 30 seconds is a common standard in DAR calculations, but some people do prefer to use 15 seconds. There is one school of thought that says it allows for a more sensitive observation of the initial absorption current behavior. With the PI, it's a longer test. It takes 10 minutes and it compares the insulation resistance at 1 minute to 10 minutes to evaluate the performance of the insulation. And of course you've got your 5 different voltages there that you can test at, depending on what you're going to do. So I've got a transformer here, which is still attached to part of an old CD player, would you believe? So we can use this. This is a good thing to test insulation resistance on. Now we want to make sure we're going across the transformer. You obviously don't want to be measuring like that, so we're going to go one end onto here and one end onto this, which goes to the other side of the transformer basically. And I've just taped off loosely the ones that I'm not using for testing. Now it's a 250 volt rated product, so we can easily test this at 500 volts. because we're only testing the transformer in this case. If it was something with sensitive electronics inside, I might be more inclined to test it at 250 volts, but this is fine at 500. So we're going to do a couple of different tests here. Now, one thing to bear in mind is we're putting quite a lot of voltage into these cables. So you want to make sure that the other end is either taped up or safe somewhere, so someone's not going to grab hold of it, because that would be bad. And also, when you're testing, you'll get this red triangle on down here, which warns that it's putting out a high voltage. So when that is the case, don't touch any of the connections or the device under test, or you may get a nasty shock. And no one wants that. So what we'll do, initially, we'll just give it an insulation test. Now, this measures insulation resistance up to 20 gigohms. So if the insulation of the transformer is more than 20 gigohms, it will just show as overload. So let's hold down the test button. Warning triangle, it's putting out 506 volts, just getting a reading of overload. So we know the insulation of this transformer is better than 20 gigohms. So it's a good transformer. Now, another test we can do here while we're hooked up to our transformer is a DAR, or dielectric absorption ratio test. Now, this will compare the insulation resistance values at 15 seconds and 1 minute. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. I'm going to stay at 500 volts and I'll speed up the footage so you can see what the results of the DAR test is. So we're going to go into DAR mode. There we go, you can see DAR there. It will automatically time it for you there. So just press test and your red warning triangle will come on. Keep your hands away. There we go. You know, the LED flashed at 15 seconds there to tell us it was taking the first reading, and it compares the resistance values at 15 seconds and 1 minute. We've got a DAR of 1.00, which is fine. They usually tend to be around 1. Anything above 1 is pretty good. Anything below 1 depends how far below 1 it is. It depends on the nature of what you're testing. If you're not sure that your reading is okay, you can always do a PI test. Now, the PI test is the same as the DAR, but it takes a little longer, and it compares the values at 1 minute and 10 minutes. Okay, so another thing you can use this to test, and I've tested an awful lot of over the years in PAT testing, is an extension lead. It's just a standard 4-way extension lead. Now, in terms of test voltage, in a PAT test, a class 1 test, you'd be testing normally at 500 volts is the default for the PAT tester. So you want to be testing above the insulation rating. So this is rated at 250 volts. We want to be testing at 500 to stress it out to see if it's going to fail or not. But there's a diminishing return for these test voltages. There is no point putting 1000 volts through this, because if you've tested it to 500 volts, that's fine. But if you're testing something like 3-phase, big motors, armoured cables, that sort of stuff, yeah, you want to be using 1000 volts for that, because you want to be above the insulation rating. So now with my PAT tester, obviously I have a device that this plugs into, and it tests all the pins for me. So with this, we're going to do it a little bit differently, and we're going to do it in the same way that you would with a fixed wiring installation. Now, remember, I'm no electrician. I'm just going on instinct here and best practice that I know of. So we're going to test between live and earth, neutral and earth, and live and neutral. And we should get comparable readings, really. So we're going to see. So I'm going to first of all hook it up live to earth. So it's a good way of checking out your random old extension leads you've got kicking about. Or sometimes you buy stuff from eBay. We're going to test some kettle leads in a minute, and we're going to test them up to 1000 volts. So we are going to test at 500 volts for this one, because we know this is rated at 250, but we want to be checking it at 500 volts because we want to be really testing the insulation on these things. Okay, so DAR 500 volts. This is live to earth. Let's test. Okay, so you can see your insulation resistance was climbing there. We got up to nearly 3.5 gig ohms, and it's given me a DAR of 1.02, which is very acceptable for an extension lead like this. Okay, so I'm now going to go neutral to earth and repeat the test. So same again, DAR, neutral to earth. So not quite as high resistance on that one, not a lot in it. We finished with the DAR 1.02, which is not a million miles away from where we were before. We're now going to go between live and neutral. Okay, so we're going to do same test again, live to neutral, 500 volts, DAR, go. Yeah, you can see we had a higher resistance there between live and neutral, nearly 3.6 gigohms. And we finished with a DAR of 1.01. So they're all fairly similar readings on this cable. So I would go ahead and say that cable is absolutely fine to use. And I have been using it. And I can confirm that as well because I checked this on my Robin Pat tester and it did get a pass. So we're looking good. So I've got two different types of kettle leads here. The first one, the insulation is rubber, and I've also got this one here which has PVC insulation. Be interesting to see what is the difference between these two kinds of materials in terms of insulation. So we're going to test the rubber one first. Obviously the cable length is slightly different, but these are both rated at 10 amps, 250 volts. And we're going to do the same three tests that we did before. So live to earth, neutral to earth, live to neutral at 500 volts. And we're going to do DAR again. Okay, let's test. So you might notice there we didn't see any insulation resistance during that run. We just see overload. That's because the insulation resistance is better than 20 gig ohms. So it's better than the meter can display. But where this is great on things like these kettle leads is it's going to give us that DAR reading. Now you also get the PI reading. Now the PI takes 10 minutes to complete and it's basically the same sort of thing. But the DAR on this meter compares the reading at 15 seconds with the reading at 1 minute. Whereas the PI compares the reading at 1 minute to 10 minutes. So if you do a DAR test on something, a cable or an appliance, and the reading you get is a bit spurious, you're not sure, then I would do a PI reading on it. Got to have a bit more patience, it takes 10 minutes. So if you've got a lot of stuff to test, you're better off doing DAR tests first, and then if you see anything that looks a bit sus, then do the PI test, which takes longer and will give you an indication of how good that insulation is over a longer period of time. Is it going to break down under heat or stress or anything like that? This one is reading 1.00. We're now going to go for neutral to earth, 500 volts, DAR. Let's go. Okay, so we got 1.00 again there, neutral to earth. Okay, so same reading we had on live to earth. So we're going to do one more test on this kettle lead, which is going to be live to neutral at 500 volts. Go. There we go, 1.00 again. Now, as I say, not an expert on DAR, but I would suggest that this cable tests fine. I'm getting the same readings on all three pins, and again this passed when I checked it with my Pat tester, so I'm going to go ahead and say this cable is fine. So let's go ahead and test this other kettle lead, which has a PVC insulation on it, and we can note the differences from that to the one with the rubber insulation, which is best. Live to earth, 500 volts, DAR, go. So that's quite interesting. We've got a DAR of 1.13 there, so the PVC insulation performing better than the rubber. I'm quite interested now to see how the insulation tests on the other pins. Okay, let's repeat that with neutral to earth and see where we go. .03. That's interesting. One last test on this is the live to neutral test. 1.22. So there you go. That proves that the PVC insulation is more effective on this kettle lead than the rubber insulation on the other kettle lead that we tested. Now, without an insulation tester, we'd have never known. Now, just to show off the full capability of the Zoyi, I'm going to test this cable now at 1000 volts. It's not something that you would ever do, and I don't recommend doing it. It's well above the testing that you need to do on these kind of cables. 500 volts is absolutely fine. But as I always say, it wouldn't be a thorough test if I didn't test it thoroughly. So let's go, and you can see the Zoyi is indeed putting out 1011 volts. Keep hands well away. There we go, and you can see what I mean about diminishing return. In general, there was no need to perform that test at 1000 volts. This is just illustrative for the purposes of this review. Now you can see we've got the same DAR there, 1.00. So now, just out of curiosity's sake, 1000 volts with the other kettle lead. Now I'm really interested to know, because this is a much older lead and it passed the insulation test perfectly well at 500 volts and it passed the PAT test. And we can see the DAR has dropped to 0.90. This is not really a problem because you're never going to be putting 1000 volts through that cable. This is just for illustrative purposes, just to show off the meter and what it can do. So it can indeed test at 1000 volts, but you'd really only be using that for really big stuff, big motors, big transformers, three-phase, big armoured cables, that sort of stuff. Right, so if there's anything around here that's going to have good insulation, it's this. This is my good old isolation transformer. Now, we can certainly test this to 500 volts, and we're going to. And what I'm interested to see is not only what is the insulation resistance from the plug end of things, but I also want to see what I'm getting from here to here, because this should be isolated. This is a good way of testing this transformer. So let's do this end of things first. So I'm going to speed through this so you don't have to sit through it all too much. 500 volts DAR live to earth. Let's go. Right, fantastic, and we've got a DAR of 1.70. I would expect it to be really good on this. You've got to be very mindful though while you're testing not to touch the plug or the device under test. So we're going to do the same test again, neutral to earth, DAR, go. Again, very good, 1.61 DAR. Excellent, just what I would expect. I'm hoping here we're going to see something very interesting, because I'm going to test live to neutral. So in theory, by connecting to these two, all I'm doing is putting it into the windings of this transformer. So really, we shouldn't see any resistance. So I'm intrigued to see what we pick up here. So let's test. As we suspected, 0. But did you see what the meter did there? Very clever. It did not put out 500 volts that I'd asked it to do. It's only put out 3 volts because it's recognized the fact there was no resistance, because I'm just putting this voltage into the windings of this transformer. It's recognized there's no resistance. I don't need to put out 500 volts. Pretty clever. That also means I know my transformer works properly. So what I'd like to test now to make sure my transformer is good is I'm going to go from the live here to the live of the output. So I'm going to do something here. Bear in mind, none of this is powered up. All of this is discharged, okay? So do not try this at home. I do not recommend it. This is just for illustrative purposes. None of this is powered up, and this is done under controlled conditions. I'm merely testing the insulation between the input of the transformer on the live to the output of the transformer on the live. Theory says the isolation transformer should have excellent insulation. We're going to find out. 500 volts, DAR, go. Fantastic, what a great reading. 2.00 DAR. That shows that the insulation of the isolation transformer is excellent. What a great bit of kit this is. Okay, so one final test I'm going to do with insulation testing then is this old power supply here. Now, I'm no stranger to testing appliances with my PAT tester, so let's have a look at this. We can do this at 500 volts because it's 250 volt rated, so we can do a test on insulation of the plug and lead, and then we'll do a test of insulation between the live and the casing of the appliance, which is generally what you do with the PAT tester. Now, I am just going by common sense and experience. There are probably other ways and other things you can do to test this. Now, when your red triangle is on, don't be touching that. That's all I will say. Let's test. There we go, so we hit 5 gig ohms of resistance on there and a DAR of 1.03. Now, one final test I want to do, which is more reminiscent of a portable appliance test, is I'm going to test the live there to the metal casing or chassis of the device under test. Nice exposed screws on the bottom, that's always a good place to go. Okay, same test again, 500 volts DAR. Let's test. There we go, we've got a DAR of 1.04. So in this case, I would say that insulation is fine, and indeed it did pass its last PAT test. I think it's due for another one. Again, if you were getting spurious readings on any of this, you could do your 10-minute PI test to give yourself a bit more of an in-depth indication about the insulation of this appliance. Okay, so another thing we could do is check a couple of resistors here. So let's try a 10 meg at 250 volts. We should be all right on that. Now, what we can do, we don't need a DAR test on this. We'll just set the timer for 15 seconds and test on 250 volts. And there we go, yeah, 10.89 megs. That seems pretty solid performance to me. There you go, and you can stop the test because we don't need to test for any length of time. It's not like testing an appliance. We're literally just testing these resistors. This is a 1 meg. I have obviously got standard resistors, but I really don't fancy putting voltage into them, so let's not do that. I'm just going to do that on 250 volts. There you go, 0.999. Pretty darn good then. Oh, there we go. Nice. Spot on. I reckon this is a great bit of kit. It has got a light on the top as well, which I didn't really say much about. When you put your backlight on, you also get a little torch on the top as well, which might be enough to see what you're doing in a dark cupboard. Right, so one thing we've not really looked at is the batteries on this. So you have to undo this little screw here to get the rechargeable batteries out. Now, I think it's very sensible that Zoyi have done it this way because you don't really want to have a USB-C connection on something that could potentially be putting out 1000 volts. Now, that would be bad. So I think this is a really sensible way of doing it with the rechargeable batteries. So you've got 3 in here. They're 3.7 volts, 1.85 watt hours each battery. Now, I've been using this for quite a lot of testing, and I have not had a low battery warning yet. That's all I can say. I've done quite a lot of testing. I've been putting out 1000 volts with this, and I've not had a problem with it at all. It's not missed a beat in the whole time I've been testing this. And you just pop them in nice and easy. Let's have a quick look under the rubber bumper. So it's reasonably easy to undress, looks nice and robust. This, they show the fact that you can just do all sorts of crazy things to this and it just retains its shape. Let's have a quick peep inside, shall we? I think I'm going to use this as my daily driver instead of the Unity for a while and see how we go. So just a quick look inside then, and if you were in any doubt that these are made by Zoyi, it's got the Zoyi model number on the board there, ZT-1000R version 1.0, 24th of the 2nd 25. So this is a pretty new model. So what have we got in here? So we've got a microcontroller, no markings on that. Got a display driver chip there, possibly next to the beeper. Got some op amps down the business end here. We've got a couple of blue protection MOVs and a small transformer, probably on the high voltage. Doesn't appear to be any obvious signs of fuses on this side of the board, but I'm not going to take it apart any further than this. It's just a quick look inside, but it does seem to be very nicely done. Well, there you go. Insulation testing with the Zoyi ZT-1000R. I think we've done pretty well on that. I really like this. I really like this. I haven't really found anything that I didn't like about it, apart from the slightly weedy stand. I think if they could beef up their stands a little bit. That's my only comment, really. What can I say? I can't really find much that I'm not happy with. Well, there you go. The Zoyi ZT-1000R digital multimeter and insulation resistance tester. Well, I think it's a great bit of kit. I think as an insulation tester, it's great value for money. As an insulation tester with a multimeter, I think it's excellent value for money at the price. I don't believe Zoyi have really skimped anywhere on the multimeter section. My only quibble's the slightly weedy stand, but that's a minor complaint compared to all the upsides of this meter. It feels really robust with the rubber bumper on it. It feels solid, it's not creaky, it feels like it's gonna last. And I'm gonna actually use this as my daily driver multimeter instead of the Unity that I've been using for the past couple of years, because I found this was actually quicker and just as accurate, and it just feels nice to use. I like the big display, it's robust, and the selector system is really quick and easy to use because you just turn it around. You've got two functions on each, some only have one function. I just find it's a nice way to work. Came with everything you need, and I think the rechargeable battery situation is a really smart move on Zoyi's part by not putting a USB-C socket on something that could be dishing out 1000 volts. I think that's quite smart to use the rechargeable batteries, and the fact they've given you the charger as part of the package, I think that's great. And I've been using this for quite a while now, doing tests and filming with it, and I still haven't charged it up. I literally took it straight out the box, and I've been using this for days. So if you fancy picking yourself up a ZT-1000R, and why not, I reckon it's a great bit of kit for the money. I'll leave the details in the video description so you can go ahead and take a look for yourself. And big thanks to Zoyi for sending me over this meter to test. So I hope you've enjoyed today's video taking a look at this digital multimeter and insulation tester, and I hope you've maybe learned something about insulation that you didn't already know. As always, massive thanks to everyone for watching, sharing, liking and subscribing. If you'd like to go ahead and hit the subscribe button, it's always massively appreciated and helps to support the channel. I'll be back soon with some more tech related videos, but in the meantime, take care and I'll see you on the next one.